You know that feeling when a door opens and you realize in a single heartbeat that your life is about to split into a before and an after? I used to think those moments came with sirens and screaming a car crash, a doctor's diagnosis, a phone call in the dead of night. But no, they come in the quiet. They come in the space between one breath and the next, in the creak of a floorboard you didn't expect to hear. They come when someone's eyes meet yours and you see, for the first time, a reflection of yourself you never dared to imagine. My name is Claire, and 6 months ago, my stepson Kyle saw me in a moment so private, so vulnerable, it still burns in my memory. He didn't look away. And what happened after? Well, that's the story I have to tell. This isn't a salacious tale. It's a story about loneliness, about the quiet erosion of a marriage, and about a connection that grew in the cracks of a broken home. It's about the line between what's right and what feels real, and the terrifying moment you realize you've already crossed it without taking a single step. If you've ever felt invisible in your own life, if you've ever longed to be truly seen, then you'll understand why I did what I did. They say life changes in the quietest moments. It's been 6 months, but I still remember that afternoon like it just happened. The sound of the ceiling fan humming a lazy, endless tune. The wave of late summer sunlight stretched and long, golden streaks across the oak floor, painting everything in a warm, drowsy glow. It felt like the house itself was holding its breath. And so was I. I thought I was alone. I wasn't. He saw me, not just in passing, not a fleeting glance. He saw me completely, the raw, unfiltered truth of me. And I haven't been the same since. I didn't hear him come in. Just the soft, betraying creak of the bedroom door. Just the immense, echoing silence that followed. And then his eyes locked on mine, wide, startled, confused, something else. Two, flickering in their green depths a recognition. A shock of understanding that went beyond the surface of what was happening. I still don't have a name for it. He didn't say a word, and I couldn't move, my body frozen not just by surprise, but by a profound, terrifying stillness. That moment, it lives in me now. It has taken up residence in my bones. Every breath, every night when the dark feels too thick. Every time I close my eyes, I've asked myself 100 times, did I forget to close the door? Or did some hidden, desperate part of me want to be seen? That question haunts me because once you see yourself through someone else's eyes like that truly, nakedly, there's no going back to who you were. What happened after that? I'll never forget it. But to understand the after, you have to understand the before. You have to understand the quiet desert my life had become. Jack and I used to be in love. Or at least, I was convinced we were. When we first got married 7 years ago, there was a warmth, a genuine effort. He was a charming, ambitious man with a smile that felt like a promise. There were nights he'd pull me close in the kitchen, his chin resting on my head, and whisper about our future. There were vacations, inside jokes, a sense of being a team. But somewhere along the way, the spark didn't just fade. It was meticulously extinguished by the slow drip of neglect. The spark turned into smoke barely there, always fading, leaving only the scent of something that had once burned bright. These days, it feels like we're just two polite strangers sharing a very nice address. Jack works late. He travels often client meetings in Chicago, conferences in Vegas. Even when he's physically home, he's not really here. His mind is on a spreadsheet, a contract, a bottom line. He nods when I talk. He says, "That's nice, honey. And how was your day?" But the words are hollow, automatic, like reading from a script he lost the meaning for years ago. Our conversations are transactions about the mortgage, the broken gutter, whose turn it is to call the landscaper. The last time he looked at me like I was the only woman on earth, I honestly can't remember Dot, and then there's Kyle, Jack's son, my stepson. He was 14 when Jack and I got together, a boy drowning in a silence so deep it echoed. His mother, Sarah, had passed a year before from a swift and brutal cancer. I remember the first time I met him. He was all sharp angles and guarded eyes, holding his video game controller like it was a shield against the world. He had and still has this quiet heaviness about him, a maturity that came too soon, a sadness that settled in his shoulders like a permanent weight. Asterisk now he's 19, a man, really. Taller than Jack, with the same strong build, but none of the hardened rigidity. His voice is deeper, but he's still reserved, thoughtful in a way his father never learned to be. Lately, though, there's been something different about him, a shift I sensed but couldn't define. He's always been respectful, almost formal with me. But in the last year, things changed. It was in the subtleties. The way he'd actually listen when I spoke about a book I was reading, his gaze focused and attentive. The way he started showing up in the kitchen when I was cooking, not to eat, but to talk. Leaning against the counter with an easy grace. And then there was that one morning, a few weeks before the afternoon. I had just gotten ready, dressed in simple jeans and a soft, cream-colored sweater. I was pouring my coffee when he walked in, fresh from a run, his dark hair damp with sweat. He stopped short, his eyes sweeping over me in a way that was different. It wasn't leering. It was slower, appreciative. A small, private smile touched his lips before he murmured, "Morning, Claire." As he passed by to get a glass of water, I caught a faint, familiar scent in the air. My perfume. Not on him, but around him, clinging to his clothes. Had he been in my bathroom? Near my dresser? The thought sent a bizarre electric jolt through me, part alarm, part something else I refused to acknowledge. I told myself it was nothing. The house is full of shared spaces. Maybe I'd hugged him goodbye recently and the scent transferred. Maybe I was imagining it. I had to be imagining it, but once you notice a crack in the wall, you start seeing the whole structure differently. I began to notice a pattern. The way he'd offered to help me carry grocery bags, his fingers carefully avoiding mine, but the heat of his hands so close. The way he'd glance up from his phone the second I walked into the living room, as if tuned to my frequency. The way he laughed at my offhand jokes, not the polite chuckle Jack offered, but a real, warm sound that made his eyes crinkle. It wasn't flirtatious. Not in any way I could point to with certainty. It was softer, more confusing. It was attention. Pure, simple, focused attention, and I didn't discourage it. Maybe I should have. But when you've spent years feeling like a ghost in your own home, when someone looks at you like you're a real, tangible, interesting person, it does something dangerous to you. It waters a part of your soul you thought had gone permanently dormant. Our house is quiet. A tomb of good taste and polished surfaces. Dinner is usually 3 plates on the farmhouse table and only 2 people sitting there. Jack is always just finishing up a call in the home office. So Kyle and I share most meals alone. We talk about safe things, his college courses, he's studying graphic design, a new series on streaming, the infuriating state of politics. But underneath the polite conversation, a new tension began to hum. Not a hostile one, but a live wire, buzzing with unspoken words and lingering looks. Sometimes we'd run out of small talk and just sit in silence. But it wasn't empty. It was charged. I could feel his eyes on me, a physical weight. Sometimes it was a direct gaze, steady and curious. Sometimes it was just a glance from under his lashes as he took a drink. And the worst part, the part that filled me with a thrilling, shameful heat, was that a part of me craved it. I hadn't felt seen, much less desired, in so long. And my starving heart, my neglected body, didn't care where the nourishment came from. I told myself it was just loneliness, that this is what happens. But then I'd ask myself in the dark, why him? Why Kyle? And the answers that floated up were ones I couldn't face. All I know is this: something seismic shifted the day he saw me. A fault line opened up in the bedrock of my life. And ever since, I've been trembling on the edge, unable to step back, unable to look away. It was raining that day. One of those thick, heavy August storms that turns the world into a gray watercolor blur. The rain hushed everything, muffling the sounds of lawnmowers and distant traffic, making our home feel like a lonely ship adrift at sea. Jack was out of town, another conference. He'd given me a perfunctory peck on the cheek that morning, already scrolling through emails on his phone as he walked out the door. Back Thursday, he'd said, not even looking up, I didn't expect anyone home. Kyle had mentioned something about hanging out with friends. The emptiness of the house, usually just a fact, felt profound that afternoon. A physical ache. I did the mindless chores, laundry, wiping counters, rearranging the fridge. I poured a glass of wine at 3 p.m., a silent rebellion against the endless, empty afternoon. Then I just stood at the living room window, watching the rain streak the glass, feeling a hollow, yearning sadness so deep it was a silence in itself. I went upstairs, drawn by a restlessness I couldn't name. I needed to feel. I needed to reconnect with the fact that I was a living, breathing woman, not just a house manager, a stepmother, a neglected wife. I closed the bedroom door behind me. I remember the soft click. At least I thought I heard it. Maybe it didn't latch. Maybe in my melancholy haze, I was careless. Or maybe, and this is the thought that claws at me, some subconscious part of me, the part that was so tired of being alone, left it open. A silent, desperate invitation to the universe. I sat on the edge of our king-size bed, the one Jack and I rarely shared in any meaningful way anymore. I just breathed, staring at my hands in my lap. The house was so quiet, just the drumming of the rain. My fingers, moved by a need deeper than thought, began to trace idle patterns on my thigh over my leggings. It wasn't about passion. It was about reclamation. It was a sad, lonely attempt to remember what it felt like to be touched with any kind of intention. I let my hands wander over my stomach, my ribs, my collarbone. I closed my eyes, not picturing anyone specific, just yearning for a connection, for warmth, for the feeling of being wanted, and for a few moments, I let go. I imagined a presence that wasn't an afterthought, eyes that saw me, a touch that was patient, exploring, reverent. And then I felt it. That presence. Not imagined, real. My eyes flew open. I turned my head slowly, my breath solidifying in my throat. Kyle, frozen in the doorway, he didn't flinch. He didn't gasp or immediately turn away. He stood there, one hand still on the doorknob, his body rigid. And his eyes, God, his eyes. They were wide, yes, shocked, but there was no disgust, no childish horror. What I saw and said was a dizzying blend of awe, confusion, and a deep, reverent intensity that stole the air from my lungs. He was seeing me, all of me. The loneliness, the desperation, the raw feminine need. He was comprehending it in a way Jack never had. Time stretched, snapped, and stretched again. 3 seconds felt like 3 lifetimes. I should have covered myself. I should have screamed, yelled at him to get out. But I was paralyzed, caught not just in shame, but in the terrifying power of being fully witnessed. He was the one who broke the spell. Without a word, he stepped back, pulling the door closed with a soft, definitive click. Not a slam. A quiet seal. I sat there, heart hammering against my ribs, the sound roaring in my ears. The silence after was louder than any noise. It screamed with everything that had just passed between us without a single word being spoken. He had seen my deepest solitude, and in his eyes I hadn't seen judgment. I'd seen understanding. I didn't sleep that night. The memory played on a loop. The rain, the door opening, his green eyes in the dim light. Shame washed over me in hot, sickening waves. But underneath it, coiling like a secret in the pit of my stomach, was something else. A dark, thrilling filament of excitement. He had looked at me, and for the first time in years, I hadn't felt invisible. The next morning was a study in agonizing normalcy. I made coffee, the scent too bright, too cheerful. I jumped at every sound. When Kyle finally came downstairs, the air grew thick enough to choke on. I couldn't meet his eyes. I fumbled with a bowl, sending cereal scattering across the counter. "Claire," he said, his voice low, rough with sleep or emotion. I flinched. "Don't," I whispered, staring at the spilled flakes. "Please, just don't say anything." He was silent for a long moment. Then I heard him let out a slow breath. "Okay," he murmured. He didn't apologize. He didn't explain. He just got a glass of water and went back upstairs, leaving me trembling, but he didn't avoid me after that. In fact, he began a quiet, persistent campaign of nearness. He'd be in the garden when I went out to read, offering to weed. He'd be in the kitchen, asking if I needed help chopping vegetables for dinner, standing so close I could feel the warmth radiating from his body. The air between us crackled with unsaid words. And the looks, they were more frequent now, lingering heavy with a shared secret. They were no longer just curious. They were loaded with the memory of what he'd seen, and my silent, shameful admission that I knew he'd seen it. I started dreaming about him. Vivid technicolor dreams that had nothing to do with a maternal bond. Dreams where he'd reach for my hand and his touch wasn't casual. Dreams where the kitchen counter wasn't a barrier, but a precipice we'd fall over together. I'd wake up gasping, my skin flushed, my body humming with a longing so acute it felt like grief. I despised myself, and yet I'd lie in the dark, next to my sleeping, oblivious husband, and deliberately sink back into the echo of those dreams. Asterisk, I began to change. Small things. I wore the soft, rose-colored cashmere sweater I knew brought out the blush in my cheeks. I went barefoot more, painted my toenails a deep burgundy. I let my hair down more often, the way I used to wear it. I told myself it was self-care, reclaiming my identity. But I knew the truth. I was dressing for an audience of one. I'd catch him noticing, his gaze a physical caress from across the room. And that secret coil in my stomach would tighten, the tension built in a series of near misses, of almosts. One evening, reaching for the same pot holder, our hands brushed. It was an electric shock. We both froze, our fingers millimeters apart on the fabric. The world narrowed to that point of almost contact. My eyes flew to his. His were dark, turbulent. He didn't pull away. Neither did I. It was he who finally moved, slowly, as if pulling himself from a trance. Then the sketchbook. I was gathering laundry from his room. It was open on his desk. The wind from the window fluttered the pages, or perhaps fate itself guided my eyes. There, in exquisite, careful pencil strokes, was my face. Not a caricature, not a simple drawing. It was a portrait of profound tenderness. He'd captured me looking out the window, a faint, pensive smile on my lips, a strand of hair falling across my cheek. He'd drawn the sadness and the softness, the woman beneath the role. It was intimate. It was a confession. When he came home that evening, I was waiting, the sketchbook in my hands. "Kyle," I said, my voice unsteady. He saw it and went pale. "Claire, what is this?" I asked, though I knew. I needed to hear him say it. I draw sometimes. To relax. He couldn't look at me. His jaw was tight, a muscle twitching. It didn't mean anything. "It's me," I stated softly. He finally met my eyes, and a raw, unguarded emotion in his gaze was like a punch to the chest. "Fear, yes." but also a defiant, aching honesty. I know, he whispered. I couldn't draw anything else. He turned and walked out, leaving me clutching the sketchbook to my chest. Feeling the ghost of his gaze on every line, that night the knock came. Soft, tentative on my bedroom door. Jack was away again. My heart catapulted into my throat. Every sane instinct screamed not to answer. But my hand was on the knob, turning it before my mind could catch up. He stood there, haloed by the dim hall light, looking younger and older all at once. I'm sorry, he breathed. For the drawing, for everything. I just stared, unable to speak. I can't stop thinking about it, he continued, his voice a raw scrape of sound. About that day. I didn't mean to, but I can't forget what I saw. His eyes held mine, drowningly deep. You look so sad, and so beautiful. The words hung in the space between us, fragile and devastating. I should have shut the door. I should have said, this is wrong. I'm your stepmother. Leave now. But I didn't. I stood there in my silk nightgown, in the dark, and let his words wash over me, through me. They were the most truthful, heartfelt words anyone had said to me in years. And in that moment, the line between stepmother and woman, between wrong and desperately needed, dissolved into dust. We hadn't touched, but something had irrevocably changed. The final act began with another storm. Rain lashed the windows, a frantic, insistent rhythm. Jack was on a red-eye to the west coast. The house felt charged, like the atmosphere before a lightning strike. I was in the kitchen, clutching a cold mug of tea, staring at my reflection in the black window. I heard his footsteps. I didn't turn. I knew the weight of his tread, the rhythm of his breath. Claire. His voice was quiet, resolute. I turned. He looked tormented, pale. I think I need to move out. I can't stay here anymore. His words were a gut punch. It's not right. What I feel, it's not right. A panic, fierce and wild, seized me. The thought of this house without his quiet presence, without the tension that had become the only thing making me feel alive, was a desolation I couldn't face. No, I said, the word leaving my lips before I could think. Please, don't leave. He looked stricken. You don't understand. It's killing me. Being this close to you, and I do understand, I whispered, taking a step toward him. Kyle, I understand more than you know. The space between us vanished. I'm not sure who moved first. One moment we were apart, the next I was in his arms. It started as a hug, a desperate, clinging thing. But it transformed. Our bodies aligned perfectly. My face was against his chest, and I could feel the frantic beating of his heart, a wild drum matching my own. His arms around me were strong, certain, not like a boy's, but like a man's. The scent of him soap, rain, and something uniquely Kyle enveloped me. I knew I should pull away. This was the point of no return, but my body refused the command. When I shifted, intending to create space, his hand slid from my back to my waist, holding me there. My own hands were splayed on his chest. I tilted my head back to look at him, to plead or protest, I don't know which. Our faces were inches apart. His eyes searched mine, asking 1,000 questions. The world outside, the storm, the marriage, the wrongness of it all faded into a distant hum. There was only his breath mingling with mine, the heat between our bodies, and the years of lonely silence that had led us to this precipice. He leaned in. Or I did. It was inevitable. The kiss was not reckless or frantic. It was soft. A question. A whisper of a touch, lips barely brushing. It was the most terrifying and most honest moment of my life. In that fleeting contact, I wasn't a stepmother. I wasn't a neglected wife. I was Claire, seen, wanted. And for that one stolen heartbeat, I let myself be just that dot we broke apart as if electrocuted. He stared at me, his eyes wide with shock and a dawning, horrified wonder. Without a word, he turned and walked out of the kitchen, disappearing into the gloom of the hallway. I stayed, rooted to the spot, my fingers pressed to my lips. The ghost of his kiss burned there, a brand. I had done it. I had crossed the line. And the terrifying, exhilarating truth was, I didn't regret it. The shame came later, in crashing waves. But in that moment, all I felt was a profound, devastating livness. The silence that descended after was the deepest yet. It wasn't just an absence of sound. It was a presence, a third entity in the house. Kyle avoided me completely. Doors closed softly. His car was gone for hours. I became a specter, moving through my days in a fog of memory and longing. I burned dinners. I forgot appointments. I'd find myself standing in a room, unable to remember why I'd entered. Jack came home, blustering about flight delays and incompetent associates. He looked at me over dinner, a faint frown on his face. "You okay, Claire? You seem distant." I echoed with a hollow laugh that I disguised as a cough. "I'm just tired." He nodded, already moving on. "Yeah, me too. This quarter is brutal." He didn't see me. He never really did. But Kyle had. Kyle saw everything. And now, because of that, we were trapped in a silent, agonizing limbo of our own making. The story doesn't end with a dramatic reveal or a neat resolution. This isn't that kind of tale. This is the aftermath. This is living in the quiet earthquake zone, waiting for the next tremor. Kyle is still here for now. The air between us is a tapestry woven with threads of memory, guilt, and that undeniable magnetic pull. We haven't kissed again. We barely speak. But when our eyes meet across the dinner table, with Jack obliviously talking between us, the entire Forbidden's history passes in a glance. It's in the way he still reaches to take my plate when I'm finished. His fingers careful not to touch mine, yet the intention screaming louder than any touch. It's in the way I make his favorite cookies sometimes, leaving them on the counter, an unspoken offering of peace, of understanding, of shared guilt. I don't know what happens next. I don't know if this is a beginning or a catastrophic end. All I know is that 6 months ago, a door opened, and behind it, I didn't find a monster. I found a reflection of my own deepest needs. I found a connection that was wrong in every way the world measures, but felt more fundamentally right than anything I'd known in years. I am living in the quiet, screaming aftermath, and I'm forever changed. The question that remains is not whether it was a mistake. It surely was. The question is whether some mistakes are worth the ruin they bring. And as I sit here in this beautiful, silent house, the ghost of a kiss on my lips and the weight of a shared secret in my heart, I still don't have the answer. I only know I can never go back to the woman I was before that rainy afternoon. The woman who was just waiting quietly to be seen.